So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio and my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited that my guest is the newest chaser, of course, Darragh the Ennis, the Menace even, Ennis. Thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Matthew.
Now, we must obviously start off by talking about this last year, which has been strange for many, but for you, it's been strange in more than one way, because obviously not only dealing with a pandemic, but also this newfound fame from the chase. So how have you found it all?
Well, it's been a bit of a weird one. So, like, when I first got the gig and I was talking to the others and no one knew who I was or that I was even coming on TV, I talked to, like, Jenny because she'd been through it most recently when the show was really massive. And she's saying, oh, yeah, it's really problematic. People recognize you and you get a lot of, like, all that kind of stuff. But because it didn't go anywhere, and when I did leave the house, I was wearing a mask, it didn't really affect me in person all that much until really recently. So that was fine, but the online stuff was much more pronounced because I gained thousands of followers and loads of trolls and all that kind of thing. But in terms of my actual day-to-day life, very, very little has changed.
I mean, in terms of obviously during the pandemic and your day-to-day work, I mean, were you affected majorly by the lockdown, or have you still been able to do most of the things that you normally do?
So yeah, like socially it's been a bit difficult. So I'm obviously into quizzes. So our pub quiz league went to an online format and I joined a lot of online quiz leagues and stuff. So I've kept quizzing just in a very different way. But my day job, my scientist job, was affected quite heavily because we work in person. So we work in the lab, and quite a lot of our specialist rooms, like our microscope rooms, are really small and they'd be very crowded. So we had to work shifts, and because I was managing all that, I had to rearrange the lab. Nobody was happy. They all had to book in 4-hour shifts and they had to plan everything ages in advance, and they weren't just able to turn up and decide what will I do today and all that kind of thing. So it was quite busy at the start, but then it just got into a new rhythm. To be honest, we got used to it, and we're pretty much right now, from today actually, at the point where we're going reasonably back to normal. We still have some restrictions, but the general sort of space restrictions and stuff have been eased quite significantly. So it was a large amount of time and a lot of paperwork, but yeah, we worked around it. Also, we changed what we worked on. So we had been working, fairly far away from any disease models, but we started working on COVID. So we were able to research. So we have had 2 papers published on COVID in the last year. So it gave us something new to work on. We formed new collaborations. So while it's a problem, it's also an opportunity, and we kind of took advantage of that.
I mean, I imagine it's not really the sort of job you can do from home, because there's obviously so much that goes into those sorts of, that sort of job. So I imagine that being able to still go out and see people, although it's been, sort of restrictions in place while doing that, I imagine that was still nice to be able to get out.
Yeah, it was. But the thing about my personal job is that quite a lot of it is administrative because I'm in management now. So I don't actually work all that much in the lab anymore. But for the other people I work with, it really put a crimp in them. So you have to remember some of them are very young and they're students from around the world. One of my coworkers, Jeff, he's from Korea, and he loved it when it came to coming back to the lab because he was living in uni like accommodation. So he was in a tiny room on his own with no one to talk to and nowhere to go, no garden, any of that kind of stuff. So he was going crazy. So once he was allowed to come back to work, he was able to get out of his room. He had somewhere to go. So for some people, it was a really big opportunity. Yeah. But for me, I was at home for most of the time anyway. I was only going in maybe one day or a half a day a week. So.
Now, for you, where did the love of quizzing come from? I mean, I've interviewed a few of the chasers before, and they've told me their stories. But for you, where did the sort of the interest, the fascination in quizzing come from?
Well, I'm fascinated in everything. This is kind of why I got into the whole science thing. I always want to know how things work. And I've always been, one of the most common things people would say to me is, why would you ever need to know that when I know some random thing, So even when I was really little, I would, do stupid stuff. I'd read encyclopedias. My mother said I never stopped pestering her, asking her why. I was always that kid. I always wanted to know why. So it's that kind of wanting to know things has always been something that's there. But actually doing quizzes is a relatively recent thing. So I would have done a quiz, if you're in a bar or something like that, I'd join in, and I was usually pretty good at them because I'm very good at retaining information. But I only really got into doing quizzes properly maybe sort of 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a bit longer than that now, about 6 years ago. So my friend John Conway, who's had a team in the quiz league in Oxford, and they needed a player. And I lived about 100 meters from the pub that it was on in. So he asked me, could I run up? So I said, yeah, no problem. Got on pretty well and stayed on the team. And that's when I started doing competitive quizzing. So I'm really new compared to the others. Some of them have been into this for years and years. I'm really new to that kind of gig. So I went on a couple of shows. So I went on, because I was in the league, they recruit quiz people from quiz leagues. That's what they do. They send advertisements out because they want to get people who are good to come on shows. So I was on a show that kind of disappeared. It only did one season, called Rebound, which was on ITV, a daytime quiz show. I was on that, and then I had been asked to do Tipping Point or The Chase. I got offers for both of them, and I picked The Chase, and I ended up as that on a contestant, which turned out to be a bit of a mad episode. And and then I went from there. But since fairly soon after that, I was approached to interview for being a chaser, and since then I got into quizzing in a much more serious way. So I'm in like 5 or maybe 6 quiz leagues at the moment, so I do it all the time. My poor wife is a widow, basically.
Now, I mean, when you're first approached to appear as a chaser on The Chase, what's going through your mind? Was it a straightaway yes, or did it take a bit of time?
I was trying to figure out who it was that was playing this joke on me, to be honest. My friends at home, especially my uni friends, are bad, but the guys I grew up with are unbelievable, like jokers and practical jokers. And I was going, it'd be just like them to get someone who can sound a bit English to come on to the phone and pretend, but they knew too many details. So once I realized it was thing, I absolutely said yes straight away. So I was 100%, I was shocked. I didn't think, and I still kind of don't think I'm all that good. But you know, they said, would you like to? Of course I would. You'd be mad not to. At least try.
And I imagine as well, the first time that you're in the studio, but not as a contestant, you're in the opposite, you're in the chaser's chair. That must have been a strange experience.
Yeah, so we got it down. There was I don't know, like they never told me, but I assume they had a few people, that they had in mind that they were trying out. But at one point, myself and another guy who was trying out for the job came down for screen tests, and we sat up in the chair and we did a run through of the show with the crew when they were setting up for a series or after or in between shows or something. And Brad, and it was all about how we interacted and things. But yeah, it was fine. I didn't get too weirded out, and I think that's probably the main reason why I got the job, is because it didn't bother me. I just sat there and thought it was fun, and I had a laugh, and they hired me. It was great.
And I imagine as well that when you're actually on the show, you're taking part. Obviously, there's now 6 chasers. So because during the main show, the normal show, you obviously don't really get to interact with the other chasers. So how well did you know the others when you eventually got to work together?
So not at all, really. So the only one I'd ever met was Paul when I was a contestant. And by sheer coincidence, he used to be on my pub quiz team before I was, which is it's a wonderful coincidence. But so I know people who know him, but that was it. So I didn't know any of the others at all. And once I was officially offered the gig, I was added to the WhatsApp group and all that kind of stuff. And I got brought in to sort of sit behind the scenes to watch a show film through. So I kind of knew what to expect. And Jenny was on, and it was the first and only time that a chaser has got every single question right. So that was the first time I was ever exposed to it. And I asked her, have you got any tips? And she says, oh, just get them all right like that. It's easy. But, they were extraordinarily welcoming, like really, really nice. I didn't know what to expect from them, because I didn't know them. But some of them are very like their on-screen personas. Some aren't, like Sean plays this really gruff guy, but he's really friendly, big bear hug, all that kind of stuff. They've been nothing but nice to me. So it's a lovely group to work with. Actually, the whole show is. Everybody gets along.
And I imagine as well getting to do the Beat the Chasers, obviously the sort of the spin-off series, and I mean the latest series, which is due to air very soon, is the first time that all 6 of you are together. So that must be so much fun to actually have the whole team together.
It is, and we obviously I didn't know what it was like to be on that show with Paul, because he wasn't well, so we had to change it, and it was great the last time, but this time was just so much better. Paul Sinha is unbelievably good at quizzing. And I'm not just saying that as a general, just in general, he is amazing. He's super quick to the buzzer. But the real thing that's best about him is that he's very, very funny. And we kind of, because people forget that this is not a quiz show as such. This is an entertainment show in a quiz setting. And we need to come up with, we get fed some lines, you know, the stupid cheesy lines, but we need to come up with stuff off the cuff. And there is no one better than him. So it takes so much pressure, both quizzing and entertainment wise, off us when Paul is there. It really does. It's such a big difference. But it's a great show to be on, because on the main show, you're on your own. You really are. You're stuck there, and you have to make educated guesses quite a bit. You know, you give what we call the percentage answers, because you think it might be that, but here you do, on that show you don't. You sit back, you wait for a second, and someone else will take it.
I mean, have you got a favourite out of the two? I mean, obviously they both look so much fun to do, but have you got a favourite one that you prefer a little bit?
Beat the Chasers by a mile. It's so much easier. It's so much more fun. It has got its disadvantages. The days are very long. So the regular show, we record 3 episodes a day. So you're working for a few hours and then you stop. Whereas Beat the Chasers, it's a long time in the seats. But it's got an audience. The regular show doesn't. It's loads of energy. You've got all this backup with you. Like, if I'm on a team with, say, Anne, one of my worst things is, like, you know, high literature, art. I've never been into that. She has it just down, you know. Question on the Bible comes up, I'm hopeless, and knows, I think she might know most of the verses, you know. It's that kind of thing. So it's a much easier gig from our point of view, from an individual point of view, and it's really exciting. So, like, I know people think that we fake it or we fix it or whatever. They've set it up in such a way that getting down to the last 2 or 3 seconds is not just possible, it's extremely likely. And with the head starts that people get and all that kind of stuff, they balance it very well. So sometimes it's like down to the last gasp, and that's so much fun. Whereas if you're on the regular show, and if your team, if say you knock out the stronger player, or you end up with a team that don't gel well together, or they buzz in wrong, they can set a really low target and it's a real anticlimax. But Beat the Chasers it's so many people coming quickly that you get really good moments every single day, and that's really good.
I mean, if you were to have been a contestant on Beat the Chaser, how do you think you would have fared with the others?
Oh, if I was to play against them?
Yeah.
Like, if I had anything more than 10 seconds, like a head start, I'd fancy myself to win. 10 seconds is a long time. And usually we offer sort of a minimum of about 9 or 10 seconds, and sometimes up to 20. With 20 seconds, I'd be able to nearly have a nap and still win. That's a huge advantage. So that's the thing. But I'm calm under pressure and I don't panic. The biggest issue that people have is they get greedy and they take the wrong offer. They see the big money and they go, woo, I'm going to go for the 75 grand, and it's like 8-second head start, and they end up losing by 2 or 3 seconds. You know, that's the thing. If you're smart and you're not too greedy, you can come away with a good 5-figure sum from that show, with a bit of luck.
Now, obviously, going forward, I mean, now that you've kind of got this sort of newfound fame, really, with the show, I mean, is there things that you know, new opportunities that obviously wouldn't have been open to you before that you're looking forward to hopefully being able to do going forward? You know, any sort of TV shows you'd love to do, or sort of any, you know, competitions you'd love to be a part of?
Yeah, there's quite a lot. So I've started a podcast myself. So it's called Untangling Science, and I'm just getting that off the ground. But that's not to make money. It's a science outreach thing. So it's about teaching adults who aren't too into science basic scientific stuff without using technical language, which is really hard to do, actually. But I'm on to my 5th or 6th episode I'm recording now, so it's just getting started. So things like that. I'd like to write a book. So myself and my supervisor in the university are thinking about writing a popular science book. But as far as TV is concerned, I would love to do a science show on TV. There's a lot of scientific output for children, tons of it, which is really great. You know, it's really accessible, and they make it with, like, you know, cool animations and all that kind of stuff. But there's very little for you know, science inclined people who don't know anything about science. So you get quite a bit on astronomy and nature programs, but that's it. There's very few, you know, trying to understand how science works for adults, like the kind of thing I'm doing on my podcast. If I could get an opportunity to do that, I'd love it. But yeah, there's other things. Like, I'd love to do sort of a panel show, or what I'd really love to do is something like Taskmaster. That's looks like great fun. That kind of thing, you know, I'd love to give them a go, but I'm just waiting for offers at this point. You know,
Would you like to follow Anne into the jungle and do the jungle?
No, I've got two jobs and a family. I've got a lot to go. I don't have the time to do that kind of commitment. But I'd have nothing to fear. Like, I'm an entomologist, so all the things about creepy crawlies I'd roll through. But yeah, I wouldn't do that. Like, I'd never do strictly I can't dance. And I don't mean that in a sort of humble, I'm not very good at dancing. I can't dance. I got lessons for my wedding, and my mother-in-law said, I thought you got lessons after she saw me dancing because I'm that bad. Can't do it. Can't ice skate, any of that kind of stuff. No, I'd like to do Bake Off. Celebrity Bake Off would be fun. That'd be a laugh. But like, honestly, at this point, I'm just going to see what happens because I'm still relatively new to this gig. I don't even have an agent yet. So,
and the other thing we must, of course, talk about, very briefly, is the amazing work that all the key workers have done. The NHS, of course, yourselves in sort of the vaccine COVID stuff. I mean, what would you like to say to anyone who's listening out there who has been working hard for the NHS, or to any of the patients who are currently stuck in hospital at the moment?
Yeah, I know it's been really, really hard. So we all have people we know who work in the system, and I've a lot of relatives in the Irish system as well. And this has been like horrifically unprecedented. But what I really would hope is to give a message out to everybody else, is that we were very quick to be grateful, and we were very quick to do empty gestures and have rounds of applause and signs in the window. But let's not forget afterwards. Let's next time the workers in the NHS are looking for a pay rise or better conditions, let's remember what they've done for us, because they deserve it at this point. So I would urge people who are talking to any politicians who are talking about where to put money, maybe some money for the NHS, because in real terms it's not being invested in, and it needs to be invested in, and the best thing we can invest in are the staff.
And what about the patients who are currently listening from in the hospital?
Yeah, I hope everybody's doing well. So my brother-in-law is currently in hospital in Ireland. I know a lot of doctors, and I'm from a scientific field, and I hope everybody's being treated well. I know it's very difficult not being able to get visitors and all of that kind of thing, but hopefully that's easing soon. And if everybody can just try and take care of themselves, it's not a nice time to be in hospital. I know it's not nice most of the times, but usually you could get visitors and people would pop in and say hello, and now you can't. So I hope you're keeping well and keeping happy and keeping your sort of spirits up. So it's not a good time.
Now, I just want to say, Darragh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time. And yeah, thank you again.
Thanks very much.